John Clayton here with an inspirational show from RPV television called Real Personal Victories, in which our audience shares victories they've achieved and challenges they've overcome. Today we're going to talk to Steve Tyssee, who founded an organization called Peak Ortho, which, you guessed it, is physical therapy. So come with me as we meet Steve. Steve, what of all the businesses you could decide to go into, what decided you to get into physical therapy?
I think that I go back to my high school days when I played a lot of soccer and getting injured over the time, and always had an interest in the body and how the body worked. And with the injuries that I kept acquiring playing soccer, it was always interesting to look at the models and the charts of the knee or the ankle to try to figure out what was wrong with me. And I think that interest, and then going to physical therapy myself when I was in high school to just get myself better, to get back to playing, and that interest is really what sparked it.
Talk about some of the challenges that you have faced and you think other people face when they decide to go into business for themselves. I mean, some of the challenges must be, I don't want to over-exaggerate, but they must be enormous. So talk about some of the challenges that exist out there.
I think at the beginning, I started working in a regular clinic, and I was working for somebody else for somewhere around 8 or so years. And you kind of have this feeling of you can find a better way to do it, and you can do it differently, and maybe more of an idealistic thought of this is easy, I could do it. And then you do a little studying and you jump out there and start trying to do it yourself. And in physical therapy school, you're not taught anything related to business. You're
what?
Taught, I know. You think that they would teach a whole business class so you'd become a business professional along with a physical therapy professional. But you learn so much about physical therapy that you don't really learn anything about business. So you jump out there on your own, and all of a sudden there's this whole host of business situations with HR stuff and employee relations. And I think that some of those things were probably the bigger challenge. Taking care of people is the easy part.
I just got to go back before I forget the question, but I'm amazed. An American, you played soccer?
Yeah.
And how did you feel about soccer?
Well, back then, it was probably more the up-and-coming sport. And I was always little, so getting into football was not an option. And so I just clung on to soccer. Baseball wasn't me. I'm too short to play basketball.
Okay.
So I ended up with soccer.
Steve, when you think about starting a business, and as I just were talking about, what are some of the blunders or mistakes that you think people make that probably when you look back at it, they shouldn't make?
It's probably more of not really having a good picture of the overall business aspect of things, where you're dealing with facilities and facilities management of keeping everything up to date and clean, and you have all your IT stuff with computers and technology. There's so much that comes into that you don't realize. I guess it's that behind the scenes aspect of a business. And I kind of mentioned the HR part of things and all the employee regulations you have to understand and know about. That stuff is surprising.
I was just gonna, you took the words out of my mouth, so those sorts of things probably surprise a lot of people and say, wow, how come I didn't know that before?
Yeah, you think that you can just call somebody up and say, hey, you want to work? Here's what we'll do, and they'll say yes. But it doesn't work that way.
But you must have had, I mean, the fact that you now have a very successful business, there must have been times when, well, maybe you must have been times when you said, is this really worth pursuing? I mean, did you ever get a little, I don't know, depressed or discouraged?
I don't think so. I think that's part of the success of it too, is that perseverance of always thinking there's another way to make it better. There's a different way to make it better. So maybe you can hit those challenges and think that's the end, versus looking at that challenge and say, okay, that didn't work the way I thought it was going to work, so maybe I'll find another way to get around it and make it work.
Do you drive yourself? I drive yourself in terms of pushing yourself. I don't mean drive a car, but I mean a lot of people are really so driven to do these things that they really, you know, push to exceed.
I don't know where like that true drive is or what it is. I've never looked at myself as being a perfectionist. I've never looked at myself as being, you know, that control person where you have to have control. I think some people get into business because they want control, or some people have the attitude of, I'm the best and I can do it the best way. I think I've always had my drive to be more the passion of helping people and thinking there's another way to make it better to help people along the way.
But don't you think you either have that drive or you don't? I mean, or do you think it's something you can acquire or learn?
I think when you're maybe in those helping type professions, you should already have it, because that's what's just going to make you successful. You know, so I think that you always have it, but I think that sometimes people even either haven't found it, or they haven't been able to tap into it, or maybe they had it and it was never really encouraged to pursue that way. And so I think that everybody innately has something that they have a drive in.
What about setting goals? And I understand your son is a dancer, and having had a show business background myself, but what about setting deadlines? Do you think setting a deadline is a good or bad thing? And I say that because some people, they set a deadline and the deadline comes and they haven't achieved it, and they say, oh, and it gets, I mean, is setting a deadline a good thing or a bad thing? And if so, why?
It's funny because I've just been doing some business strategy classes.
Oh, okay.
And so they're all about setting a date and a deadline. So whatever, if your big goal and vision is to be this, then by, you know, April 20th, 2020, this is where I want to be. So they talk about setting a deadline. I've never done that. I've always been, you know, looking at where I want to go, and then maybe not setting a deadline, but then all of a sudden you realize, wow, this is where I wanted to be. And you get to that point, and then you say, okay, well, now I want to do this. And so you never really have that satisfaction, I guess, or I haven't really had that satisfaction of thinking, I finally did it. Because maybe I did it, and then I think, okay, what else could I do?
You see, you just raised a really interesting point. I mean, you have such a positive attitude that when you reach the objective you set yourself, you've achieved it. Ah, wonderful. But then there must be people, and I know there are, who reach that point, January the 20th or whatever in 2020. Oh, I didn't reach. I mean, it can really make a big downer on you.
Well, you just change it.
Oh,
I think that's part of those barriers you might hit.
Okay.
It's you go down one path, and I can think of, you know, other paths that I tried to go down and it didn't work, and so you just say, okay, that didn't work because of various reasons. You either abandon it, or you say, okay, it didn't work because of this, so let's try to tweak it, and maybe we'll go this way. And I think that's that perseverance of you never really are thinking it didn't work.
You know, you just raised a point about you went through a big, or you are going through a planning session. What about staffing? I mean, isn't it difficult to, quote, and I hate the correction, finding the right people, in quotes? I mean, is that something that is a big challenge or a small challenge?
I think it's probably the biggest challenge as I've gone forward and added on more staff. We're somewhere around 14, 15 employees now.
And you started with?
Well, if you count my wife, 2. And so, you know, as you keep on adding, you know, those are those mistakes along the way. But I think that trying to have everybody understand what your vision is and what your big picture is. And I try to make everybody understand you're not really here for the paycheck part of it. You're definitely here for what's the objective of what we're all trying to accomplish. And if they buy into me and buy into my vision of where we could all go to like help as many people as we can, you know, get out of pain and get moving without relying too much on, you know, drugs and surgeries and medications. Like if we can all think that and we all have that same mindset, then bringing people on board is easier.
Do you think when you find the right person, you know it? I mean, sometimes you meet someone and you think, well, maybe, and other times you meet somebody, yes, he or she is absolutely terrific.
Well, I think I've learned by having too much of that. Yes, that's the person, because in 6 months later, it's why was I thinking, you know? Yeah. And I guess that's the hardest part in amongst other business owners, not even physical therapy related, but other business owners in general. It's always how do you interview that part of it. Yeah. And so who knows?
For people who are watching and wonder, how can I contact Steve? Do you have a website that you can give out, or do you have a phone number they can call? I mean, how do you reach people that you want to reach?
I think we always either do the website because that has all kind of information on it.
And your website is?
It's peakorthopt.com.
Okay.
And so we have a lot of information on there. Staff bios are on there. Other services that we offer are on there. And then all the therapists' emails are on there. So anybody can email any of us directly through our website.
So it basically gives you a how-to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
How important, Steve, how important is social media today? It seems to me that you can achieve things on social media that, gosh, when you and I were, you know, in our 20s were absolutely impossible.
Well, when I first started, I've been open now 15 years, 2003 is when I opened, and computers were still not really,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, we were just beginning to do some stuff, but for the most part, you're still pencil and paper. And so as things have evolved now with a lot of the marketing techniques and a lot of getting your name out there, the social media really is where we're trying to focus now. Like that's our next big area of market and advertising, is reaching out to the social media side. So we now have our Instagram account and we have our Facebook account. And so now we're trying to look at getting into how to take advantage and use Facebook marketing and things like that. So when people are searching, you know, they find us.
For people who are watching and they're saying, yeah, I've only got so many dollars to do this. And obviously, if you know anything about promotion and promoting a business, advertising plays, I would still imagine, a pretty important part. So in your planning to set up a new business, do you advise someone to set aside a certain amount of money, or do you just, I don't know, let word of mouth get the word out once you're open? That's kind of a big, challenging question.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to all of the kind of business benchmarks of how much money to allocate to the marketing side of things, you can go anywhere from 2% up to 10% of your total revenue to put towards marketing. Okay. And then you talk to a marketing person, they're going to say it should be about 10 to 15%, you know? But I think it depends where they say if you're in a maintenance mode in your business, are you in a growth mode of your business, to how much that goes. But they kind of say somewhere around 2 to 10% of your overall budget should be dedicated to marketing. But you talk about the social media though, that's almost free.
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely.
Then you get into, well, how are you doing it? You know, and email marketing is still very, very popular.
Okay.
But even we're going backwards to say in the technology days, we're going backwards now to start doing more handwritten thank you cards. You know?
I love that personal touch.
It's kind of an interesting flip now that we're going back to doing handwritten notes.
Yeah. Steve, as a final question, given the success that you have achieved, what about those in our audience who are watching and saying, yeah, I think I can? What encouragement would you give them as regards, hey, do it?
It's pretty much just that. Just do it. You know, there's this phrase that I always keep in my head where it's, I'm probably going to say it backwards because I always end up doing that, but it's paralysis by analysis, you know? And so I think what happens so many times is people will research and read and analyze and get so caught up in that they never take the step to actually just get it going. It's just start the process of going. And you're never going to plan anything more than 50% of what you want to get done, because at least for me, you don't even know what you're getting into until you get into it. It's that you don't know what you don't know game. So you keep on doing more research and analyzing different scenarios more and more. In reality, you're not going anywhere.
Absolutely.
And so I think that there's a lot of that. Just take that next step to go.
So Steve, thank you ever so much for coming in today and giving our audience some really interesting insights into starting your own business. I know that what Steve has discussed today will hopefully give you some new insights into the challenges and, yes, the excitement in starting your own business. So we thank you, our audience, for tuning us in today and spending part of your day with us. We're really most grateful for that. So until next time, this is John Clayton saying, what is your real personal victory?